about. Rob Sullivan, welcome to the Edge Television broadcast. Man, I appreciate you coming on all the way from Baltimore, Maryland. And tonight we'll be talking about cinema symbolism. And I before you came on, I was doing all kinds of movie trivia quotes. So you're talking to a guy who knows movies, but not as I certainly don't know as much as you do.
Well, thank you. I've written 2 books about it, about this arcane imagery that is turning up in movies for one reason or another. I actually touched on it in my very first book, The Royal Arch of Enoch. My final chapter was dedicated to it, and it was something I really enjoyed talking about. I really enjoyed researching. So I continued on with it, and I wrote 2 other books about it, Cinema Symbolism and Cinema Symbolism 2, naturally.
Mm-hmm. While we'll be looking at those books too, and I was looking at the bio section there, or some notes I have on you, and it says that the inspiration for the book came to you in a dream.
Well, that was from that was my first work of fiction. Mm-hmm. The Royal Arch of Enoch was my first book. That was a product of 20 years of research. And then when I finished the Royal Arch of Enoch, the last chapter, like I said, it dealt with Masonic, what you would call like Enochian solar symbolism in film. So I started writing Cinema Symbolism 2, Cinema Symbolism. I was writing the first one, and I was probably about halfway through that, and I never intended to write a work of fiction. And when I was writing Cinema Symbolism, I had this very lucid dream. And I woke up the next morning, I remembered everything about it, and I went to my desk. I started making notes about the characters' names, dialogue I remembered. And as I was writing the first cinema book, I just started doing this on the side, like as a pet project. Like I said, I never intended to write a work of fiction. And I continued working on it. I got the first cinema book out, and then at that point, I started doing Cinema Symbolism 2. And at the time, I was writing them both at the same time. But unfortunately, that became too cumbersome. So I put the work of fiction aside, and I completed Cinema Symbolism 2, and then I went back to work on the work of fiction. It's called A Pact with the Devil. That's available now also. Mm-hmm. And that's my first work of fiction. I'm actually working on some more fiction as well. Mm-hmm. But that entire story came to me in a dream.
Wow. You know, when I think of Hollywood symbolism, I think of movies like Eyes Wide Shut, maybe Lord of the Rings, various things like that. And, there seems like there have been movies that almost predict the future. And I've always wondered, Rob, have you come across in your research where you said that clearly is an event that happened in the future?
Oh, absolutely. Some of it is very uncanny, and some of it's very startling. And quite honestly, it's unexplainable. You can look at it a couple of ways. As a lawyer, I try to argue both sides of it. You can look at it as a case of Jungian synchronicity. Jung was a psychiatrist who argued for this thing, a philosophy or a theory, better word. He called it synchronicity, which was things were related, interconnected somehow through some sort of supernatural power out there. Or you can look at it that people have somehow advanced knowledge of this and are incorporating it into film. Some of it is quite startling and uncanny. Like, for example, I've been on other shows and talking about this, and I'll bring up something as well that I'm actually writing Cinema Symbolism 3 right now. Something else I just discovered that's startling. But like, for example, with 9/11, the September 11th terrorist attack, you can clearly see in lead up to that things in movies that seem to be prophesizing this or predicting it. You have the Simpsons episode where Bart waves up the money in front of the program that says 9/11 on it. And of course, the 11 is formed by the World Trade Center. Then you have movies such as Fight Club, where you have the destruction of the financial center at the end, which is the buildings. Tyler Durden refers to it as Ground Zero. In the film, you'll remember something called Operation Latte Thunder, which is where they destroy the sphere like art sculpture that's clearly supposed to be the old sphere at the old World Trade Center Plaza. Mm-hmm. And then you get into some really eerie ones with The Matrix, which came out a couple years, I think about 2 years before the 9/11 incidents, where Neo Anderson's passport actually expires on September 11th, 2001. And that's very fascinating because that entire movie has to do with the end of consciousness, the start of new consciousness, the awakening to a new reality. Mm-hmm. And then you have another one such as The Patriot with Mel Gibson. There's a fascinating one in that where at the very beginning of the movie, this is a movie that came out in the year 2000. So again, we're right around the incident, where at the very beginning of the movie, he's making a chair and he weighs it. And the chair weighs 9 pounds, 11 ounces. And then he sits on it and comes crashing down. So it's very fascinating that there is some other things going on that makes this particularly eerie and macabre. For instance, The Simpsons episode, the one where he flashes the money. The episode was called New York City versus Homer Simpson. I believe it's called that. It's Homer Simpson versus New York City, something along that line. And the actual episode aired on September 21st, 1997. I mean, we're almost talking 4 years to the date of the actual 9/11 incident. And then you jump ahead 2 years to September 21st, 1999. That was the release of Fight Club, which is, again, another one of these 9/11 movies. So this is, and then 2 years later, you have the actual event. So, I mean, this is almost like lined up, synchronized to the date almost. So you do find this in film, and it's very hard to account for. It is very macabre. They're very dark. As I've been progressing with this research, you actually, believe it or not, will find evidence of this happening in real life. Apparently, one of the things I just came across, and I was actually quite startled by this, was I'm working on Cinema Symbolism 3, and quite by happenstance, somehow or another, I was reaching the Columbine, the mass shooting at Columbine, which is hard to believe we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of that, actually next week. And I was very startled to learn that one of the shooters in Columbine, specifically Eric Harris, in his journal, this has been around 1998, 1999. This was right before the shooting. Actually said that one of his plans was to hijack a commercial aircraft, load it with explosives, and fly it into Lower Manhattan. Very startling. And when you combine this with his partner in crime, Dylan Klebold, who is the other shooter, what makes this particularly alarming is Dylan Klebold's birthday is September 11th. Actually 1981, 20 years to the date of the actual incident. So when you combine that together, that's pretty alarming. So it seems to me that it's not only occurring in movies, but there seems to be real life events that seem to be prophetic or predictive somehow. I'm not sure exactly how this is occurring, but it is occurring.
Mm-hmm. Wasn't there also a Batman movie where there's a map, then he's looking at this map and this city is circled, and I think it was one of the where a mass shooting occurred.
Right. That's in, I believe that's in The Dark Knight or The Dark Knight Rises. I believe it's The Dark Knight Rises. There is a bit of that one can be a little bit explained away because it was Sandy Hook, and they look at a map and part of Gotham, the Gotham map says Sandy Hook on it. And people took this to mean that this was prophesizing the Sandy Hook event. And you can look at it at that. I did some research on this because I had a lot of people asking me about it. And you can actually, believe it or not, I believe, trace back to the 1960s. There's actually an old Batman comic where they have a map of Gotham on it, and one of the suburbs or one of the precincts in Gotham was just called Sandy Hook. So that one kind of does seem a little bit happenstance, but it is interesting to say the least that it was put in a movie that came out, I believe, in 2012, which was the same year as Sandy Hook. The Adam Lanza event. So no, it is definitely something that again does seem to be prophetic, although it did seem to be part of the Batman mythology well before the actual movie.
And what about the Simpsons episode where President Trump is coming down the elevator?
Yeah, that's an interesting one. I've been asked about that a lot. There is a lot of things in The Simpsons that they do prophesize that do seem to come true, but the one with Trump actually coming down the elevator actually happened after he actually did it.
Okay.
Yeah, there is a little confusion on that. That episode is actually called Trump-tastic Voyage. And the one where he's coming down the elevator actually was based on him actually coming down the real elevator. So that occurred afterwards.
Okay, we have a real important question that came in for you. Some of the viewers want to know is there's apparently a statue behind you that just lit up. We have to know what that is.
Oh, this one behind me. Yeah, this is actually on my profile picture. It's a little statue, a lamp that features the devil sitting there holding a pitchfork. My mother and father are antique dealers, and about 24 years ago, I was at an antique show with them in Massachusetts, and we went into an antique store, and this lamp was sitting there, and I just kind of liked it. I thought it was kind of cool looking. I thought it was very devilish looking. It's the devil. He's holding a pitchfork.
Yeah.
He had a white light under him. I made a red one. I inserted a red one, of course. And the story behind the lamp was I bought it. I've never had any supernatural events occur on it. It just sits on the shelf. I've got it behind me right now on the mantle. And it just sits there. I had to turn it on from time to time, no big deal. And the way it kind of factors into all this was when I finished A Pact with the Devil, this work of fiction, when it came time to photograph to do the about the author photo, I remember looking at the lamp. I thought, oh, I got to incorporate this somehow into the photo shoot. And when I was doing it, I was sitting there and I had the lamp there. And when you do these things for these about the author photos for the back of the book or for the back page of the book or whatever, you go through about 10 or 15 photos. You have red eye, or you're looking stupid, or you got a stupid looking grin on your face, or just did it come out or whatever. I mean, I go through this all the time. With like Royal Arch or cinema symbolism, I've got to take about 10, 15 photos before, one comes out good. But when I did the Pact with the Devil one, I got it on the first take. The photo was taken, the lamp was sitting there, and I looked at the photo and I said, oh, we don't have to take anymore. I absolutely love that photo. So it's actually part of the about the author photo for Pact with the Devil. And if you go to any of my social media or my website, I have it currently stationed as the about the author photo, or like the biography page with me. I've got it as my Twitter photo. I've got it as my Facebook photo. I like the photo, and the lamp's pretty cool, and I got it turned on sitting behind me.
It's kind of weird to hear you say, and when I did a pact with the devil, it's like, wait a minute, I gotta shake that off.
I never actually have made a pact with the devil.
Okay, good.
I would never do that. I would highly frown and urge anyone out there not to do that. In the book, in the work of fiction, the actual demon that the witches are interacting with is actually a demon known as Lucifuge Rofacal. But I didn't think a pact with Lucifuge Rofacal really, really rang right. So I just made it a pact with the devil.
Okay, all right. We understand now. So one of the viewers says, "Well, Rob, do you have a statue of Jesus in your house?"
I have a couple crucifixes in the house. Yes.
Well, there you go. Kind of an offset, I guess, for some folks.
I'm not. I really don't consider myself a Christian, but I do have some Christian iconography around the house.
Well, let me ask you. Get back to these predictive messages and there are a lot more than we could probably cover in tonight's broadcast with you. But some have said that before a major event happens, there's in the celestial realm, there's like an agreement that is made or exists in that humans have to be notified from some kind of celestial legal process. They have to be notified in advance that that's going to happen, and the outlet for those notifications is through movies and cinema and things like that, or books, or any kind of audio type of thing. Have you ever heard that before?
No, I honestly have never heard that. I think a lot of times the symbolism, I mean, you do have this issue of movies being prophetic. That's irrefutable. You could argue at different ways of how it's getting in there. A lot of times when movie symbolism is occurring, a lot of it's not predictive. A lot of it is trying to convey mythological, very ancient mythologies, things relating to Kabbalah, Gnosticism, ancient religions, and it's not done as a predictive mechanism. The movie's trying to basically turn itself it's using the symbolism to transform itself into like modern artwork or a mythology. Think of it like an architect using sacred geometry in a church or something.
Okay.
It's something you can't see, but you know it's there.
But
and by incorporating this stuff in films, it like elevates it to a new spiritual level. That's the way I see what seems to be going on with these movies.
Sacred geometry, then, isn't that kind of along those lines, in that if you're able to access certain numbers, angles, that you connect with some sort of power or force? Doesn't that say kind of the same thing, that if you tune into that there's something can happen?
Right. The idea behind it is, I think you're on the right track, is that by using sacred numbers, geometry, the golden ratio, Vesica Pisces, you're incorporating divinity. Since the numbers and the ratios are considered divine, you're incorporating divinity into your building. That's the idea behind it. You're investing this divine spiritualism in the building. It's the same thing. This is akin to alignments to the stars, astrological alignments with buildings of importance. And the motivation for that is, and this is what you see with the Masons doing this with the cornerstone droppings and cornerstone layings and things like that, is the idea behind it is, by aligning the buildings to these celestial bodies, whether it be the moon, a star system, a constellation, the sun, what have you, is that you're drawing down the heavens. The idea was that since the stars are closer to God than we are, that by aligning the building to them, you're drawing down the spiritual energies of the stars, drawing down divinity, and incorporate it into your building. At least that's the theory behind.
Well, there's some premise that the Tower of Babel was being built so that humans could reach to the celestial heavens and maybe perhaps kick God out of his place and take over. So something similar along those lines. All right, we've got a number of questions coming in for you. Robert Sullivan of Baltimore, Maryland, from Nadi out of the YouTube chat. We have two chats going on. Is there? Have you ever looked into the New World Order card games?
Yes, I am a little familiar with them. I'm not an expert on them, but again, these are ones that this is like what we talked about earlier with the movies, predicting 9/11. And there was an Illuminati card game that references a lot of catastrophes. And one of them, I believe, was something similar to the World Trade Center, and another one was something similar to the Pentagon. So, yeah, I mean, I don't dispute that. I mean, there is these lead-ups to 9/11 that seem to be prophetic and predictive, and it is uncanny to say the least.
There is some accuracy to that, and I think it certainly needs to be investigated. Scotty from the YouTube chat as well asked this question. Well, I'm not sure. This may be a late question, so Scotty, you may have to clarify. It says, "What is his name? The man you were talking about, and where can the work be found?" But I don't know. There may be a question related to something previous. So, Scotty, if you'd clarify that, we'll get that question over here to Rob. Rob, and I mentioned right off the bat, Eyes Wide Shut. That just Stanley Kubrick, man, just seemed like you maybe go back to 2001, Space Odyssey. Weren't there a whole lot of messages in that movie as well?
Yeah, well, I mean, Kubrick really is a master of this. His movies seem to tie into each other. I'm finding this out more and more. He seems to like to use techniques and to reference his own movies a lot. And what's really odd about it is movies that he made early on seem to predict his later movies somehow. It's really startling and uncanny. Eyes Wide Shut was his last movie, and this is a movie I analyzed in Cinema Symbolism 2. Where this is kind of what I call one of the ultimate Illuminati movies, where you have the sex magic ritual in the mansion, the secret society working behind society, sort of pulling the strings, things like that. What I really like about Kubrick is he really understands symbolism and he knows how to use it. He knows when to not use it. He really is an expert on it. He really cultivates it in a movie. The first movie where you really see him getting his game on with this is a movie that came out in 1962 called Lolita. And that thing is just a symbolic masterpiece from start to finish. He references his early movies, but for some reason he seems to prophesize movies that he would go on to later make. It's startling. And then what I also like about Kubrick is he knows when to use. He understands the context of the movie and what the movie is about. And because of that, he knows how to use symbolism properly. So like in The Shining, he uses a ton of repetition. In Full Metal Jacket, he begins the movie, he ends both segments on the same thing. In Eyes Wide Shut, he uses the Christmas lights. This is something he gets from a movie that he made in the 1970s. He lights Eyes Wide Shut exactly like he lit a movie in the 1970s called Barry Lyndon. And Kubrick is just so masterful with it. I mean, I almost could write a book about Kubrick himself with the symbolism he does and employs. I mean, The Shining is just endless repetition. And one of the movies he doesn't like is the one movie he disowned that he didn't like is Spartacus. And he actually finds ways to make fun of it in his later movies. It's quite remarkable.
Isn't Tom Cruise a perfect person for Eyes Wide Shut, in that he's a member of the Church of Scientology, and I think he's like right at the top. Isn't he in the top of that organization?
He is in Scientology. My understanding of he cast Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise in that movie, who were at the time married in real life. I believe Kubrick used them because they were sort of the Hollywood it couple at the time. And I think he wanted a married couple because a lot of the movie revolves around the stress and strains of being married. And I think he wanted a real married couple to be able to convey that. That's what I got out of that. But no, Eyes Wide Shut is a very dark movie. I like it very much. It's one of those movies to me that if you watch it without your symbolic glasses on, quote unquote, you might be bored to tears with it. But if you watch it symbolically and you know what to look for, the movie's very interesting. So I like the movie, and like I said, when it comes to Kubrick, he really is a master at this.
And you talk about predictive. I mean, that HAL 9000 computer, man, sounds like the AI technology. It sounds like Alexa today, man. So, it was pretty advanced film there. All right, curious, ask this question. Who is behind the references to evil deeds in movies? Are they for or against the people?
Well, that question paints with a broad stroke. I'd have to see the movie and I'd have to see the context that it's in. Not all the symbolism is evil. I wouldn't characterize it as evil. These filmmakers use different techniques to convey different things, and you can't categorize it all as under one giant thing. You have to look at each movie individually. You have to look at the symbolism individually, and you have to look at the context it's presented in individually, because every movie's different. They use symbolism. In some movies they use the same symbolism, but in another movie they'll use identical symbolism, but because the context is different, it means something completely different. It's not unanimous. You got to look at each movie on a contextual basis and see what the director or the filmmakers are going for, and that'll give you a better handle as to what's going on in the movie, what they're going for, if they're going for an outcome.
Can you give us Robert, can you give us a couple of comments on The Wizard of Oz? Now, the only symbolism I've ever seen is the wizard behind the curtain, and I say that's the deep state, man. Those are the people behind the deep state telling the rest of us how to live and controlling our lives. But is there more than that in that movie?
Oh, absolutely. The Wizard of Oz, this is a movie, and I see it on the screen. This is one that I took on in the first movie. This movie is multi-layered. This movie has different levels. In fact, it's leveled three ways. So it has three levels of symbolism. The first is the profane explanation about a young farm girl, goes on this magical adventure, meets these three strangers, defeats an evil witch, goes home, have a nice day, happy ending. This is what you would call your profane explanation. The guy who wrote it, L. Frank Baum, was in Madame Blavatsky's Theosophy movement or Theosophy Society. And the movie is really a Gnostic theosophical movie. That's another layer of it, where Dorothy is looked at as you would view Dorothy as a Gnostic initiate into the mysteries. She goes up the ladder of ascension, up the winding ladder of Minerva or Mithras to the magical land. She meets three strangers. Madame Blavatsky said in order to receive gnosis, you have to have intelligence, fortitude, and courage. Hence the three strangers who are seeking a brain, a heart and courage. She walks upon the golden path of religion only to find that it leads to a false messiah. In Gnosticism, this would be the demiurge character. You have the two witches who the evil witches are of the east and west. That signals stagnation. You only receive gnosis and enlightenment by moving up and down the ladder. So the good witches are of the north and south. They're trying to help Dorothy achieve this Gnostic epiphany, which for her, she achieves. She comes to understand that she has her revelation that there's no place like home. So you can look at The Wizard of Oz as an entirely Gnostic film, basically with Baum's theosophical background, Gnostic background. You can clearly look at The Wizard of Oz as a Gnostic movie. I call it as initiation into the mystery tradition. But then on another level, it's also political. The Wizard of Oz is a complete socio-political economic allegory of about 1895 to 1900, where the Wizard of Oz is William McKinley. He lives in the Emerald City. This denotes paper money. The yellow brick road is the gold standard that McKinley was trying to enforce. This is why it leads to Emerald City.
Well, on a political note, man, my mind, being a cowboy that I am, I should have been in Clint Eastwood movies. In fact, I think they modeled him after me. But anyway, the Scarecrow without a brain, that would be AOC, and then the witch would be Joe Biden, and saying, "Candy little girl." I'm seeing Joe Biden there, so I'm seeing some political talk there, in presentations in this movie.
Yeah, it was really a reflection of the politics of 1895, 1900. Dorothy is a representation of Theodore Roosevelt. The Wizard of Oz is William McKinley. The Cowardly Lion is Eugene Debs or William Jennings Bryan, who were McKinley's socialist and democratic opponents. They will all bark, no bite, hence they were a cowardly lion. The Scarecrow would be the American farmer. The Tin Man would be the American laborer. In 1895, 1896, there was a mass depression that laid off a lot of laborers. They went back to work through the auspices of Standard Oil. Hence, the Tin Man needs to be oiled up to get him back working.
Wow. Okay. As you see, I see in my background, I got a picture I grabbed off your website there. That is from The Shining,
Right.
and that's a classic show right there. I don't know if you saw it, but I actually had the guy Johnny. He was yelling at me saying, "Here comes Johnny." I don't know if you saw that, but I was playing that. But anyway, what's going on with The Shining symbolism there?
Oh, well, where do you want to start? Well, right now we have in the picture, the Overlook Hotel is a representation of the dark side of the United States. It's built on the Indian burial ground. You'll hear Ullman tell Torrance that all the best people stay here, all the elites stay here, all the Hollywood types stay here. And of course, you have Wendy and Danny who are about to go to the dark side of the United States, dressed as the American flag, red, white, and blue. So you have that one level on it, and then the Shining is all about repetition. In a sense, the movie is about reincarnation and repetition. Is Jack Torrance, this reincarnation of this earlier character Grady, who murdered his children, and is Jack destined to do the same thing? It's repetition. Is everything just seems to be repeating itself, and to blast your subconscious mind with this, Kubrick repeats literally everything in the movie. Characters say lines back to each other. Everything is presented in doubles. For example, there are two boilers, there are two typewriters, there are two mazes, the hedge maze and the dark quarters of the Overlook. There are two tennis balls. There are repetition. The number 12 repeats. Room 237 added together, you get the number 12. The hotel is KDK 12. Jack throws the tennis ball against the wall 12 times. He hits the door with the axe 12 times. Wendy and Danny take 12 turns in the hedge maze. The entire movie, I get into it much more in the books, but the entire movie is a study in Kubrick repeating, endlessly repeating things to blast your subconscious mind of this, what I would call an Ouroboros, the Overlook Hotel is an Ouroboros, a snake biting its tail, this repetition cycle that never ends. Kubrick couldn't help himself. He does this again in a movie that he made a few years later called Full Metal Jacket, and he borrows from The Shining. He does the same technique. You have two movies the movie is split in half. Full Metal Jacket, you've got the Paris Island sequence, which is the first half of the movie, and then you've got the Vietnam sequence, which is the second half of the movie, and they both end the same way. At the very end of the Paris Island sequence, Hartman storms into the head at the end, and I'm not going to repeat what he says, but he mentions Mickey Mouse. He says, "What's all this Mickey Mouse going on in here?" And this is how the movie ends, with them singing the Mickey Mouse marching band at the end of the thing. So the movie begins where it ends, essentially. And this is Kubrick borrowing this from The Shining. He just couldn't help himself.
Let me ask you something. In the movie Apocalypse Now, one of my favorite shows, at the end, I distinctly remember the airstrike was called in, but I just watched it again, and there was not an airstrike. Was there two different endings of that movie?
It could be. There could be a director's cut. To be brutally honest with you, it's been years since I've watched Apocalypse Now, and I wouldn't want to field any questions on it.
Okay.
But there could be two endings. Loads of times these movies have a theatrical ending.
Well, I know there's got to be at least two different versions, because in one version, the soldiers end up banging the Playboy bunnies in the helicopter, and I have the version without the banging going on there. All right, let's get some questions for you, Rob Sullivan. They're just flying in here. Are you familiar with the occult symbology or symbolism in Rocky?
Well, there's there's in the book I talk about the unification of the male and female, the alchemical wedding. This is something I talk about in Cinema Symbolism too, and I do get into it a little bit with the whole idea of Apollo Creed being the name Apollo being a sun god. So I am familiar with it to an extent. I get into it a little more in depth in Cinema Symbolism too.
All right. And Azure out of the YouTube chat asked this question back to The Shining. Does The Shining movie debunk the moon landing?
Yeah, I'm familiar with this theory. I'm not sure I buy into it 100%. The theory is that you could argue that they actually went to the moon, but they just couldn't film there. So the theory is that they hired Kubrick to film the guys on the moon hopping around, things like that. And there's a theory out there that Kubrick is trying to expose this in The Shining. And of course, this is the scene where Danny is playing with his toys and the ball rolls in and he stands up wearing the Apollo 11 sweater. And of course, the idea is that that's the rocket launch. And then he goes to room 237. And one of the theories is, and this is true, is that back in the late 1970s and 1980, the moon was 237,000 miles from the Earth. So by Danny heading to room 237, it's symbolizing the rocket Apollo 11 going to the moon. And this is Kubrick's way of tipping you off that he actually filmed the moon landing. I'm familiar with it. I can't say I'm 100% in on it, but I am familiar with the theory. I mentioned it in the book. But I like to, when I decode The Shining, there's just so much more fun stuff going on in that with the repetition. I just love the extent that Kubrick goes to.
Yeah, I thought I heard that back when that Shining was released that Joe Biden wanted a personal screening with those two little girls that appeared in there. So I don't know. All right, let's get another question here. It said, did Kubrick movies mark him for death? Did he reveal too much, Rob?
No, I don't think so. I've heard that theory before. The problem is these movies came out. No one stopped him from making them. So I don't think necessarily he was marked for death. So, for example, if he was planning on making Eyes Wide Shut, and he was filming it and then dropped dead and the movie was canned, I might be able to see, okay, maybe he was killed and they buried the movie or something like that. But the movie was released, and Kubrick just died a few months later, unfortunately. So, no, I don't believe that he was necessarily marked for death. I guess anything's possible, but, I don't have enough evidence to convince myself of that yet.
Were the sex scenes real in Eyes Wide Shut?
Well, they appear to be. I mean, I guess they're as real as you can be for an R-rated movie. The movie definitely seems authentic. I mean, I think the movie's very well made. Kubrick clearly knows what he's talking about. I like the film. Like I said, I like the symbolism he uses in it. It can be a little boring at times, but I thought the movie was very authentic. I thought it was a very, like all his movies are.
And here's a great question from Overbuilt Automotive YouTube chat. What's your thoughts on the movie Prometheus, directed by Ridley Scott?
I've never seen it, so I will have to withhold comment.
Okay. Well, there's a Prometheus-looking guy in 300. Let's bring him up right here. This guy right here. This kind of looks like in Prometheus. It's a space movie, and there's this giant guy who kind of comes back from the dead, and he's going to attack Earth. I guess he's going to do. But anyway, in 300, who is this big guy here?
Right. Well, this is in 300. This is Xerxes, who is the king of Persia, and the symbolism going on here are the bulls next to him. That symbolizes the old age of Taurus, the bull, when the Persians ruled supreme. This would, of course, be what the symbolism is. It's denoting his solar rulership, his divine presence on Earth, and the two bulls are Taurus, symbolizing the old age of Taurus, the bull.
Well, good. I'm a Gemini, and that's twins, so hopefully it's not like twin bulls. That could get creepy for me. Dream. One of the viewers asked, "How did they get the dune buggy up on the moon?" Well, I guess that's discussing whether or not we went to the moon. I know Israel tried to go to the moon here just the last couple of days, didn't make it, I don't think. But in your opinion, Robert Sullivan, did we go to the moon?
Well, you could. I mean, I have no reason to believe they didn't go to the moon. Whether the footage was filmed, was staged, that's possible as well. But I have no reason to believe they didn't go to the moon. But like I said, and what's interesting with a lot of the NASA symbolism, I get into it a little in the Royal Arch of Enoch book. You have a lot of Masonic solar imagery with NASA as well. That's a fascinating talking point. But I have no reason to believe they didn't go to the moon. So my answer is yes. I think they went.
That seems like that's kind of still up for debate with a lot of people.
Sure.
In 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 your notes, you sent me some things here about symbolism, cinema symbolism 3. And I saw somebody in one of the chats say, "Where can we get your books from?" I don't think we discussed that yet.
Yeah, well, they're. I have 4 books out: Royal Arch of Enoch, the 2 movie books, and A Pact with the Devil. They are available on all the major online retailers: Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books a Million. They're in the print edition and the ebook format. Kindle, Nook. You can go to the web page and just type in the name of the book; it'll come up. The easiest way is just go to my website. My name is Robert W. Sullivan IV. And my website is just that. I know you linked it up on the Edge's website. It's www.robertwsullivan.iv.com, robertwsullivan.iv.com. Links there to buy the books, information about me, information about upcoming shows I'm doing. I have you linked up there as well. So just go to my website. It's very easy to use, very interactive, and links there to buy the books in their various formats.
All right. For those of you just joining us, we do have on our Zoom line tonight Robert Sullivan from Baltimore, Maryland, talking about his book, Cinema Symbolism, and other books. Rob, we started talking about 2001: A Space Odyssey, and then we started discussing whether or not we went to the moon. So let's go into space and talk about Star Wars. What's happening in these movies?
Oh yeah, well, the Star Wars movies are great. The key to understanding these movies is comparative religion, and comparative mythology is the better word. These movies come out of the world of a man named Joseph Campbell, who was a very famous comparative mythologist. And Lucas used this book that Campbell wrote called The Hero with a Thousand Faces, documenting this mythological archetypal hero's journey. And pretty much the hero is a solar avatar. So, I mean, for example, if you look at Star Wars, and you got Princess Leia, this is from the original trilogy, 4, 5, and 6. You have Luke Skywalker would represent the sun, would be like a solar hero. Think like Hercules or Heracles or Apollo. And of course, in mythology, the sun has a lunar sister, Diana or Artemis. And of course, Luke Skywalker, his name Luke comes from the Latin lux, meaning light. What light walks across the sky? The sun. So his name gives himself up. And of course, he has his lunar sister right there, Princess Leia, who wears the white robes of the moon. This would be in comparative mythology, like I said, the Diana. So, what do they do battle with? Well, the sun and the moon do battle and interact with darkness. Hence, we have the Sith Lords. And of course, in comparative mythology, Apollo was Horus, who dealt with a character known as Seth, who was the Lord of Darkness. Hence, Luke Skywalker does battle with the Sith. So we have a lot of comparative mythology studies going on in Star Wars. Lucas tweaks this as the mythology progresses. If you read, I would highly recommend, if you're interested in the kernel that became Star Wars, read Campbell's book. It's called The Hero with a Thousand Faces. In that, Campbell specifically gets into these different components that the hero encounters along the way on his journey, and they turn up one by one in the Star Wars movies. And then you get into the original. Then a couple, whatever it was now, 20 years ago, Lucas did the episodes 1, 2, and 3. These are the prequels, and he toys around with symbolism in those as well. And he's pretty clever with it. I remember, a couple of the things that I remember talking about in the movie book that he did. And I remember in part 2, which was Attack of the Clones. He had the whole idea of the birthing process of the clones being done on this watery planet called Camino. Well, when they get to the planet, it's the raging waters. It's nothing but this turbulent ocean. And this is representing the birthing process, the breaking of the water. But then when they go inside, it's completely sterile. It's all men. It's nothing there. And it's completely boring. And this is because they're cloned. There's no female. And I thought that was a real neat dichotomy, very interesting dichotomy of sterilization versus the raging waters outside, denoting the different methods of the birthing process, how the clones were created versus how a natural human was created. That was very good by Lucas. The Star Wars movies are really ripe with a lot of symbolism, a lot of comparative mythology. I took on the original trilogy and 1, 2, and 3 in cinema symbolism, the first book, and I'm doing some of the newer movies. The Last Jedi. I know they're getting ready to come out with episode 9. what's the other one? The Force Awakens, and then Rogue One was another one. So yeah, there's lots of fascinating stuff going on in those movies.
I like the way they go. Skywalker. Hey, but I'll tell you what though. Here's my Yoda impression. Powerful you have become. The dark side I send in you. How does it sound?
Pretty good.
Pretty good, Yoda. But get back to Princess Leia, man. Was there hidden symbology where the big Yoda slug-looking thing gets that big nasty tongue out, starts licking her?
No, I don't think so. I don't think there was anything to that. I was Jabba was this disgusting
Jabba the
international gangster, and it's part 3 is the sort of culmination, or this would be, let's see, part 6. Say part 3, but it's actually episode 6. This is the culmination where Luke confronts the ogre father, the dark father archetype, and eventually redeems him.
Yeah.
That's one of the components of Campbell's monomyth.
Yeah.
So good stuff going on in Star Wars.
Now the political connection, Jabba the Hutt reminds me of Stacey Abrams. All right, let's get to this question here from Azur. Any symbolism in the movie Riddick?
I've never seen it. So again, I'll have to withhold judgment.
Okay, and another one. What about children's movies like Nintendo Mario and SpongeBob SquarePants? That boy right there got to be something creepy in there.
Again, I've never seen those, so I would have to withhold judgment, but you will find symbolism in movies, in Disney productions. A lot of these come out of old fairy tales, but you do find some symbolism going on inside the movies of Walt Disney. One of the ones that Disney put out that is overloaded, it's a Masonic ritual from start to finish. Not necessarily a children's movie. It's one I talked about in the first book I wrote, Royal Arch of Enoch, is National Treasure, which is a Masonic ritual put on celluloid. If you ever want to see a Masonic ritual enacted out in a movie, it is the first National Treasure movie. That is the complete Royal Arch of Enoch ceremonial from start to finish. Everything in that movie is a Masonic ritual.
Yeah, we have a viewer in our on our website chat. His name is Dreamwalker. All right, and here's a question from Stack Stevenson. What do you think about Rod Serling?
Oh, with the Twilight Zone, I mean, these are a great television show. There's so many episodes. I've seen some of them. I haven't seen all of them. It's been a long time since I've watched them. But no, I like the Twilight Zone. And a lot of times movie makers seem to homage or use the Twilight Zone to reference something else. So, I'm familiar with it to an extent. I like them. I like the Twilight Zone.
Is Freemasonry involved with movie making?
Well, the answer is yes and no. You have a lot of actors in Hollywood who were Freemasons, and a lot of the studios the founders of the studios were Freemasons. So you will find, in the movies, Masonic emblems turning up. For example, like I said, if you really want to see a Masonic movie, watch the first National Treasure movie. But like in movies like Tombstone, with the cowboys will be wearing Masonic emblems.
Whoa, time out. Tombstone, my all-time favorite movie, man. What's going on in there?
Yeah, well, in at the very beginning of it, the two cowboys who come out, Texas Creek Johnson and the other guy are wearing Masonic lapel pins, and then the one guy, Behan, I believe, is wearing a Shriner's emblem. So you will find, a lot of the old cowboys the real life guys were Freemasons. Kit Carson was a Mason. So you will find a lot of Masons among the Old West. And Hollywood too. A lot of the actors in the golden age of Hollywood. Clark Gable, Douglas Fairbanks Sr. and Jr. were both Freemasons. In more modern times, this surprises a lot of people. Richard Pryor, the comedian, was a Freemason. So you will have a lot of people in Hollywood who are Masons, and you do find Masonic themes turning up in films from time to time.
Okay, so in this movie, quote from Doc Holliday, is there any symbolism in it?
No.
Wait. I'm going to give you the quote. Is there any symbolism in this quote? Why, Kate, you're not wearing a bustle. How lewd.
No, I don't think so. But I do. I was just mentioning it because of the cowboys wearing the Masonic emblems.
Okay.
But I don't think there was anything more to it than that. Okay. But it's a great movie also. I very much enjoy Tombstone.
Okay, very, very, very good. What is Hollywood ultimately promoting to the masses? What is their end game, Rob?
Well, I think when you're dealing with, when I watch these movies and I uncover this symbolism, the one thing that does impress me a lot is the lengths that these guys will go to put something that's so subtle in, and it's almost next to impossible to see, that conveys this such a greater meaning. So I think, when I'm researching this and I'm watching these movies, these movie makers, these directors see themselves as artists. And the movie for them is and using the symbolism is a way of elevating the movie to some sort of occult Kabbalistic expression of some kind. So that's really what I think they're going through, is the elevation of this movie into some modern day mythology. That seems to be what their end game is. And of course, along the way, make a ton of money at doing this.
Let me ask you, okay, so if there was, before 9/11, a movie that showed two buildings blowing up, or maybe a specific scene that shows those buildings blowing up, is there any way that one could watch that before 9/11, which Omar said really didn't happen? Is there anything they could have done about it? Is there any event, I'm saying, that is projected that we now can look back and say, well, that's a scene of what happened today or last year or whatever? Is there any way we can see a scene, say, wait a minute, this is saying something's going to happen in the future, and do something about it beforehand?
No, because we don't know what the future is. It's like Nostradamus. You can only. That's the problem with this, is you can only interpret it after it's happened. The scene you're talking about has happened. It's Fight Club. Watch the end scene of Fight Club, where they destroy the two buildings, and they're the financial centers, and the two buildings come down in a controlled explosion, very similar to the World Trade Center. Tyler Durden calls. He said, "This is ground zero." This is going to be, the start of a new beginning. But at the time when you're watching it, am I saying to myself, "Oh, this is predicting two planes flying into the Twin Towers and bringing them down"? No. So it seems, that's sort of like the one of the consequences of this is you can only see it after it happened.
Right.
And that's where it gets dicey as to whether this is occurring intentionally or if this is some sort of synchronicity going on through some sort of higher consciousness. And that's debatable.
Yeah. Somebody asked the question, John Smith out of YouTube, what do you think about Star Trek symbology?
I'm not the biggest fan of Star Trek. With Star Trek, I'm not an expert on it. When you get into, I talk about it briefly in the movie book, where you have the one character that's real popular in the movie, the one archetype that's super popular is the wizard archetype. And this is what I call the Hermes Trismegistus archetype. He's sort of the godfather of modern day magic. He's a god coming out of Hellenistic Egypt. And he is, Gandalf, Obi-Wan Kenobi, Yoda, very popular archetype. And this, of course, is Mr. Spock on Star Trek. I talk about this briefly in Cinema Symbolism too. And I'd have to get the book. I can't remember off the top of my head. But the Spock hand gesture, the live long and prosper, that's actually relates to, that's it. That's Hebrew Kabbalah. That has to do with Hebrew Kabbalah. You have to read the book for it, though.
Okay. Guest 279 says, are you still an active Mason yourself?
Yes, I am. I joined the Blue Lodge of Freemasonry in 1997. I became a Scottish Rite Mason here in Baltimore in 1999. And yes, I am still active and a member of the Freemasons.
What level are you?
I am in the Blue Lodge. I'm a third degree. That is a Freemason, and I'm a 32nd of the Scottish Rite.
Oh, hey, right here in Indianapolis, I understand we have the largest Scottish Rite temple out there. Are you aware of it?
No, we have a large temple here in Baltimore. I don't know which one's the largest. I know
we got the large. Hey, man, we got it.
You got it?
Yeah, because this one here actually has a floating dance floor. They said. So I've
never been to it, but it wouldn't surprise me.
Well, actually, I got a tour one time by a 33-degree level Mason, and this guy he took me to the top, and he said, "This is where they change clothes and they get ready for their procedures, and so that was kind of an interesting day there." Now, what other movie in your book that shows clearly symbology that everyone would recognize?
Relating to anything in Pacific or
Yeah,
just
what's one of your like dead on? You wrote about it, and everyone would know about it. Well, what I wanted to see is the audience to know a movie, and you talk about that probably everybody's seen that they would go pop and say, "Oh wow, did that mean that?"
Yeah, well, I'll give you an example. Like, for example, it's a long story, but like Back to the Future. So, for example, we have in that movie that's a study of comparative religion that has to do with the sun. Marty would be Horus. The father would be Osiris. The mother would be Isis. You get into this whole notion of the DeLorean, the sun chariot, having to hit 88 miles per hour.
Okay.
And this is when it's activated and can break the space-time continuum. The number 88, it's multi-layered, the symbolism of that. The number 8, when it's turned on its side, is a symbol that denotes space-time. So this is one of the reasons why it has to hit 88 miles an hour. But when Marty goes back in time, it's drilled in his head, and this gets repeated constantly, is that the lightning's going to strike the clock tower at 10:04 at night. 10:04. We're told this over and over again. And this is actually a solar reference. This has to do with the date. 10:04 at night is actually a date of October 4th. 10:04, October 4th. And on the solar calendar, the Gregorian calendar, 10:04, October 4th means there are 88 days left to the year. So this ties into why the lightning has to strike at 10:04, turns the DeLorean into a sun chariot, and allows Marty as Horus to travel through time. So that's one example. In The Exorcist, there's a lot of religious allegory going on in that. With light and dark, good and evil. What one you can look for in that you'll see as clearly, as plain as day, is at the very end of the movie when Karras exorcises the demon and he throws himself down the flight of steps. Pay attention, because spray painted on the wall next to him is the word pigs. That's intentional. That is referencing the tale in the New Testament where Jesus exorcised a demon from a man and cast the demon into a herd of pigs. And then the pigs went over a cliff, killing them and getting rid of the demon. So by writing the word pigs next to Karras, that's symbolizing this New Testament tale, and it's conveying to you subconsciously that the exorcism was successful and that the demon is no longer in the little girl. So it's little things like that you can actually look for. This is one of the things that I really love about this study, and I love about doing this is, when you're dealing with UFOs and Bigfoot, you're always asking the question, is it the planet Venus, or is it a helicopter or a government craft? Is it a guy in a monkey suit or a gorilla suit? One of the things I like about doing the movie stuff is you can see it. I can point you and say, if you look at this scene, you're going to see this, and you'll be like, oh yeah, that's really there, and that's really going on, and that's what this director's going for. That's one of the things I really like about this.
Back to the Future. Any symbolism about Biff?
Oh well, there's tons about it. I have a whole chapter in.
Like when Biff has got to wax the car. Was there any?
Well, the enemy, it's a comparative religion study when with Marty being Horus, and then the father would be Osiris, that would be George, and then the mother Lorraine would be Isis, and of course the character in the Egyptian mythology who kills Osiris and he's ultimately brought back to life is named Typhon. And of course, his last name is Tannen, Typhon Tannen. So it's a play on his last name. And then, of course, this is what happens in Back to the Future Part 2 is, George as Osiris is killed and resurrected. So that's very interesting. It's, again, a study in comparative religion. The Back to the Future movies I really like because they're very meticulous. Movies in the buildings. There's all kind of occult symbolism going on. The buildings in 1985 are often paradoxical to the buildings of what's going on in 2015. And again, back in 1885. For example, I'll just get into this real quick. And this is one of the things I love about it and the attention to detail. In 1985, there's a building that Marty stands in front of. It's right by the clock tower, and it's called the Third Eye, and it's a fortune-telling building. This is in 1985, and it's a building in 1985 that allows you to see the future. When Marty and Doc in the sequel go to 2015, the same building is occupied by blasts from the past, which is Marty, where he gets the almanac that tells you the past. So in 85, it tells the future. In the future, it tells the past. Great paradoxical imagery going on there.
Okay, we have this question here, and this is very interesting from Overbill Automotive. It says the X-Files TV show spinoff, the Lone Gunman pilot, the pilot episode, plane almost crashes into Twin Towers just before 9/11. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. That's another one of these that seems to prophesize 9/11 before it happened. The Lone Gunman, The Patriot, The Matrix, Fight Club, Donnie Darko is another one. Vanilla Sky with Tom Cruise is another one. Vanilla Sky was filmed, was released right after 9/11. And there is a scene, it came out in December of '01. The movie was filmed shortly before the 9/11 attacks. And if you watch, the scene was actually filmed right before the attacks. If you ever watch Vanilla Sky, the end of the movie is Tom Cruise goes up on this giant skyscraper that's actually overlooking the Twin Towers and jumps off. And I mean, the first thing you think of is these people leaping off the World Trade Center. I mean, it's quite honestly scary to watch.
In the movie trilogy, the Matrix, I mean, there's all kinds of symbology in that there, Trinity and Nebuchadnezzar. What are they trying to tell us with that movie?
The Matrix, the first Matrix, is a Gnostic movie from start to finish. If you ever want to watch the Gnostic theology on film, one of the best movies to see is the first Matrix movie. This is your Valentinian strain of Gnosticism, where you have the false reality, you have the demiurge, the creator of the false reality. This is the architect. He turns up in the sequel. You have the archons, who are the agents. You have Neo, who is the Gnostic Christ figure, who is trying to awaken mankind from their slumber, bring them to gnosis, awake them out of their state. So the very first Matrix movie is essentially a Gnostic fable of the Valentinian thread. This is a movie that is over all three of them, but the first one is just overloaded with all sorts of esoteric imagery, identifying Neo as a Christ figure. I mean, even when he wakes up in the real world, I mean, he's lifted cruciform towards the light. When he gets brought on board the bridge of the Nebuchadnezzar, you're going to see the nameplate for the ship, which is Mark 3:11. That's a Christ reference to the Bible verse Mark 3:11.
Well, Rob, it seems that Christ did try to awaken the world, and maybe for some time it started to awaken. It certainly came out of the Dark Ages, but looking around the planet today, it looks like it's going in reverse. Is there any movie that's predicting another Christ figure to come on the scene to lead the earth, mankind back into the light?
No, not that I'm aware of right now. The Christ archetype, the Christ figure, is incredibly popular in film. You will find this archetype all over the place. The Christ Savior figure, whether it be Superman, the only begotten Son who comes down to planet Earth to save mankind from itself, from with miracles. John Connor in The Terminator, who's born almost of a virgin to save mankind from the machines. John Connor, J.C. John Coffey, J.C., who dies to redeem the South in The Green Mile. So the Christ archetype, James Cole in J.C. again, in 12 Monkeys, who's sent back in time to save mankind from a cataclysmic plague. So the Christ Savior figure is very popular in Hollywood. I don't know of any film off the top of my head, though, that is predicting like another coming Savior figure, but I'd have to go look.
Or maybe is there one that may be predicting an Antichrist figure?
Well, I mean, you will find demonism and demonology. I mean, you look at, that's kind of overt. You look at movies like The Omen, things like that talk about the Antichrist. So, that's, the devil is also very popular in Hollywood. No doubt about that.
I'd say the devil's pretty popular in Hollywood. Well, touche on that one. Now, I was just thinking, okay, so you're back pre 9/11. I mean, couldn't somebody say, I got a feeling that some big event's going to happen in America, some building's going to be blown up, and then start looking at movies to see if there is such a thing? And so I'm kind of saying, could we think of an event in the future and search it out in movies, whatever, anybody watching this show, maybe even Planet X smashing into the Earth or whatever. Is there something we could search ahead of time if we just come up with a topic that seems to be on our spirit?
It's possible, I suppose, but I wouldn't know how to do it.
So I'm talking about taking this to the next level, Rob.
Yeah, I want to know how to do it. It seems to me that you can only kind of see it before after it happens. And this is unfortunately one of the unfortunate realities of this. I can't. I mean, if you were to watch a movie, I mean, maybe in some movies you could see future technology. I don't dispute that. And maybe you could predict something or see something in a movie and think, oh yeah, I could see something like that happening. But some of it's just really startling. But like I said, it's really not until you see, until the event happens and then you go back in time and say, oh my God, look at that. That seems to be foretelling it. And again, it's as a lawyer, it's a two-way street. I can argue it both ways. I can argue it as a prophetic thing or something prophetic or something predictive.
Yeah.
I can argue it both ways.
Yeah, Rob. A couple questions back on the Exorcist there. The girl on the bed. Is there any symbology to her head spinning around? And wouldn't I consider what she did with the crucifix to herself sort of a democratic thing? These kind of people that scream at the sky that you've seen out there running around naked, women with their vagina hats. Wouldn't they be the same kind of people that would do that with a crucifix? And so is there any symbolism? And really wasn't that predicting the future? But what about the head spinning around?
Well, no, I don't think there's a lot of symbolism going on in this Exorcist. The scene you're referring to, that's in the book also. And that was Blatty trying to come up with something very graphic. Like the whole motivation behind that thing was he wanted to have the girl do something that would shock the mother so much that she would come to realize that the girl was possessed by a demon and it wasn't some sort of psychological disorder. Exorcist is overloaded with symbolism, deep plays on light and dark. What I call Neoplatonic imagery. The movie starts in the heat, ends in the freezing cold. The whole idea of hell being a frigid wasteland. This is archetypal. This comes out of the world of Dante Alighieri, the Divine Comedy, and of course the whole idea of the ghost. The demon possessing her being, when they go into the room, it's frigid, it's freezing, and this is why the demon has to be exorcised by the sun priests, the Jesuits. And of course, the symbol for the Jesuits are the sun. So to get rid of the frigid demon, you call them the sun gods. Loads of, the one thing I love in The Exorcist that Friedkin, the director, does that's just really masterful is it's the scene where Chris is sitting in the Barringer Clinic and the doctors are telling her that a supernatural cure is needed for her daughter, that they're going to have to, the girl's beyond medical need. Or beyond a medical cure, and she's going to have to seek out an exorcist. Pay attention to that scene very carefully. This is where Christ comes to realize that she's going to have to turn to a spiritual guide to get rid of this demon. Pay attention to that scene very carefully. It's a complete reenactment of Da Vinci's Last Supper, where Chris is sitting in the middle, surrounded by the four groups of the three doctors, symbolizing the 12 apostles. And what Friedkin is doing with your subconscious mind is this is the scene where she realizes that she's going to have to turn to Christ to get the demon out of the little girl, and very subliminally, very cleverly, Friedkin recreates the Last Supper scene to convey that to your subconscious mind. That's very expertly done.
Somebody wrote in watching the program, said, Rob, why did you choose to become a Freemason?
Why did I choose? I come from a long line of Maryland Freemasons. It skipped over my father, but my grandfather, my great-grandfathers, loads of my ancestors were Freemasons. And it was something I was always interested in as a child. I've always been interested in the supernatural, the occult, cryptozoology, UFOs. I was fascinated by this as a kid. I grew up on watching a show called In Search of with Leonard Nimoy. When the time was right, it was a perfect time. I was out of let's see, this would have been 1996. Yeah, so I was out of Gettysburg College, and this was right before I went to law school. I just happened to be lucky enough to meet a friend of my mother and father who was a Freemason. And it's the old saying, to be one, ask one. And he had the ring on. And I said, hey, I see you're a Freemason. I want to join. And he said, okay. He said, I'll get you the position. And I took it from there. And I joined.
So to allay some of the fears out there, I understand that people have a blockage on Freemasonry for the reasons. They certainly have their opinions and such. But you don't cast spells on people, do you, Rob?
No, we do not cast spells on
Okay.
people.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I've been involved with it for over 20 years, and very influential, has a lot of power, certainly is behind the United States of America. I mean, it built the country. The country is a Masonic republic. Everything in the country from start to finish is Freemasonic. The architecture, the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence are all Freemasonic documents. So I could see where there's a lot of conspiracy around it. But no, we don't cast spells on people, and it's completely voluntary. We don't force people to join, and you know.
Was Da Vinci a Freemason?
No, I don't think so. The Masonic Guild, the Masonic Order, as it were, as it is today, was formulated officially in 1717. Granted, there were Masonic guilds, stonecutter guilds that existed in Europe prior to 1717. I do not dispute that. It emerges officially on the history books on June 24th, 1717. Highly doubtful Da Vinci was a Freemason. Was he involved with occult sciences, groups like the Rosicrucians, alchemy, things like that? Yeah, probably. But I doubt he was a Freemason.
Now I know the Masons laid out Washington D.C. and they also laid out Indianapolis, and I think Indianapolis may be on the same line as geographically as D.C. But in Indianapolis years ago, around the turn of the century, in the middle of Indianapolis is a circle that's called a circle. But there are pictures of an archway that around 1900, they built an archway going right into the circle, and at the top of it, it said the magic circle. They took it down a couple of years later, but it's hard to find those pictures, but they exist. So that tells me that the circle was dedicated to Masonic tradition, I suppose. But does that generate a positive energy, a negative energy? What does it do when you sort of dedicate stuff like that?
Right. Well, the idea behind it is, like I said, is that it's sacred geometry and sacred ratios and things like that. It's supposed to be positive. I would look at it as pretty much as benign. The reason that people view it with suspicion and negativity and view it negatively is because there's no transparency. It's just done. And this goes for Washington, D.C. and a lot of the architecture in Baltimore. I mean, you'll find this on the cityscapes. Like you said, I've never studied Indianapolis, but I would have no doubt believing that it wasn't there. But you find it at a lot of the college campuses as well. They're laid out to Masonic tradition. The logos, the seals of state capitals. Again, this all comes out of the world of Freemasonry. It generates a great deal of suspicion, mostly because there's no transparency. But by and large, it is no way intended to be negative. When the founding fathers were building this country, they didn't want a monarchy and they didn't want a Vatican-style organization. So they turned to a society that many of them were members of that was democratic and egalitarian. So hence they based a lot of the fundamental principles of this country, including the architecture and the symbolism, on Freemasonry, both the high degrees and the Blue Lodge.
Well, if I had to choose, I would choose the Masonry, sort of the traditional founding of this country. It's clear it's on our money. I mean, so it was definitely there. But I know that President Obama was claiming that Muslims helped start this country, and I got to draw the line right there. That didn't happen at all. In fact, we were fighting over in Tripoli. All right, so Rob Sullivan, what is your favorite movie of all time?
Oh boy, I don't know. I don't think I have a favorite movie of all time. There's some that I really like. Favorite movie, I don't know if I could really pin one down. I love Fight Club. I love Monty Python and the Holy Grail. I love the Star Wars trilogy of 4, 5, and 6. I think they're great. I love the first Raiders of the Lost Ark movie. What's some of my other favorite ones? Good grief. So many that I like. I love the Back to the Future movies. I love The Exorcist. For horror, I love Halloween, the 1978 Halloween. That's a classic. I really don't limit myself to one genre. I mean, I love, comedies. I love Caddyshack. That's a great movie.
Okay. All right. Let's get a couple more questions for you, Rob. We have this one. Guest 279. How about symbology and Rosemary's Baby?
Oh yeah, yeah, loads going on in Rosemary's Baby. That's a movie that I always wind up going back to. This was based on a novel by Ira Levin and directed by Polanski. There's just, I mean, in the little, I see we're running out of time. Loads going on in that. The one thing that I can definitely tell you is, and again, it's very deep, a lot of symbolism going on. The black magician in that movie, Mercado, is obviously an Aleister Crowley analog. The name Mercado or Mercada is a play on a name of a character that comes out of a book and a movie by a guy named Dennis Wheatley. The movie and the book is called The Devil Rides Out. Interestingly, the book was written in the 1920s or maybe the 30s or 40s. I have to go check. But the movie version also came out in 1968, which is the same year Rosemary's Baby came out. Mm-hmm. And in The Devil Rides Out, there is an Aleister Crowley black magician in that named the same name, Mokada. And Ira Levin and Polanski are clearly paying homage to this character, this Aleister Crowley character in Rosemary's Baby by naming him Mercada. It's the same name phonetically. Yeah, lots going on in Rosemary's Baby. It's a great movie. That's another one of my favorites. Very good movie. I always wind up talking about it in my movie books. I always wind up going back to it in some form or fashion.
See, when you said the Mercada, what popped in my head was "Como Mercada." I think it's Lion King or something. I don't know about that. I can't believe it. Somebody says, Rob, have you ever performed any spells? I think we just answered that question. You guys don't perform spells over there, right?
I wouldn't call it spell casting. I've been involved in the rituals. I've gone through the Masonic rituals. In college at Gettysburg College, I was a brother of a fraternity house called Lambda Chi Alpha, and I was in the ritual there. I mean, I actually had a role in the ritual, but I wouldn't equate that to spell casting.
Yeah, you didn't see no demons, did you?
No.
You don't got a demon, do you?
I hope not. I don't think so.
Okay. All right, here's a question from Dreamwalker. Do you know any followers of Jesus Christ that are Masons?
Sure. You can become if you are a Christian, you can become a Mason. That is no problem whatsoever. Some fundamental Christians do not like it because there is no invoking of Jesus Christ in the Blue Lodge, but Freemasonry is deistic. It's non-denominational. You can be a Christian. You have to believe in a supreme being. You can be a Christian and join. You can be a Muslim and join. You can be Jewish and join. You can be a Buddhist and join.
Yeah.
It does not require membership to one specific religion. You can be Christian and join. I know Christian Freemasons. In fact, in one of and this is an anomaly actually, in the high degree body known as the York Rite. That is essentially Christian Freemasonry. In fact, to join its final body, which is the Knights Templar, you actually have to pledge allegiance to Jesus Christ to actually join it. So that actual body sets itself aside from Freemasonry. Most Freemason bodies are deistic. The Knights Templar actually requires a pledge of allegiance to Jesus Christ.
Do you have one of them little red hats with a little tassel?
No, those are the Shriners. That is the mystic order of the I forget the full name of it. That's the shrine. I can join that. I am eligible to join, but I have not joined the shrine. But the Shriners are Freemasons.
Okay. But what about that symbol? I think they have that. It looks like a Muslim sword.
Right. Yeah, the nobles of the mystic shrine, a lot of the rituals are based upon Islamic tradition. This may come as a surprise to a lot of people, but Blue Lodge Freemasonry is essentially, if you ask me what religion it reflects the most of, it is the Muslim religion. There is loads, specifically mystical Islam. It's a theology known as Sufism. It's mystical Islam. There is loads of Sufism that is incorporated in Blue Lodge Freemasonry. A lot of the rituals also revolve around Solomon's Temple, things like that, which are Judaic. But you will find a heavy influence of Sufism in Blue Lodge Masonry, which is mystical Islam. That may surprise a lot of people, but it's definitely there.
What would be the number one thing that Masons have done for this country that you're quite proud of?
Well, they founded it. I like the. I mean, they created the country. They didn't want a monarchy. They figured out a way to do separation of powers. This comes straight out of Blue Lodge Freemasonry. The triple division of government of the United States between a executive, legislature, and judicial comes straight out of Blue Lodge Freemasonry, where it's divided three ways
Mm-hmm.
between a worshipful master and two
Mm-hmm.
wardens, a junior and a
Mm-hmm.
senior. This is a solar reference. In the Blue Lodge, um, the worshipful master sits in the east as the rising sun.
Mm-hmm.
The junior warden is the south as the sun at midday, and the senior warden in the west as the setting sun. So the triple division of government comes straight out of Blue Lodge Freemasonry. The separation of church and state comes out of James Anderson's Constitutions of Freemasonry. So I thought the founders were very clever and very wise to use this egalitarian democratic society to really craft the nation around. Like I said, I've said this on other shows as well. They may not have known what they wanted, but they didn't know what they didn't want, and they didn't want a monarchy, and they didn't want a Vatican-style religious organization.
Mm-hmm.
So they went with Freemasonry, which is deistic and does not embrace one religion.
There seems to be a Hollywood trend for uh, female leads to come into what are traditionally male type roles. Is there any symbology in all that?
I'd have to know a specific example, and I'd have to watch the movie to see the context of it. But
Mm-hmm.
Again, I would just have to see the specific example. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there are the
Is
heroine.
there social engineering going on with movies?
I think there is social engineering. You can look at it through global elites, and movies could reflect this. I think that's fair to say.
Mm-hmm.
I think in certain instances, I don't think all movies do, but I think there could be instances where movies are reflecting social engineering. I believe that.
Mm-hmm. What about the process of putting subliminal messages in movies? Have you ever been able to watch a movie, or do you have any technology to stop frame to see what these images are?
Well, it's not like in movies. It's really not like the skull in the ice cube or anything like that. It's more of a subtle reference in the background is what these guys go for, or vocabulary. The one thing I would point out when it comes to doing the study is these guys are experts with this. And when I say expert, I really mean that. These guys, these filmmakers have an entire palette they use to convey symbolism, both exoteric and esoteric. And it goes beyond just, placing a symbol in a movie. The casting of a specific actor or actress can be occult in nature.
Mm-hmm.
The costume design can be occult. The dialogue can have occult inferences. The Shining is a perfect example of this, where the characters repeat lines over and over again
Mm-hmm.
to convey repetition. Music can be used. So these guys paint with a wide variety of paints, are tools available to them to convey this, and they don't rely on just one. They use a wide variety of techniques to convey symbolism to you. It's not just one thing. It's a wide variety.
Mm-hmm. In the movie Three Men and a Baby, was it just kind of a joke that they said there was an apparition outside of a window and a rifle placed strategically in that movie? Are you aware of that?
I've heard the story. It's been debunked. It's not a ghost.
Okay.
It's actually a cutout that turns up somewhere else in the movie. It's like a stand-in. It's like a cutout. It's actually not a ghost. There's YouTube videos on it. I'm familiar with it, but I know it wasn't a ghost. It's some sort of cutout of some kind.
Mm-hmm. Somebody wrote a question in, a kind of a religious question. It says, "Has anybody ever asked you if you would accept Jesus as your Lord and Savior?"
Sure. Well, I mean, I've never been asked that.
Mm-hmm.
I don't consider myself a Christian. I've studied the Christian religion. I've
Mm-hmm.
studied Judaism. I've studied Islam.
Mm-hmm.
I consider myself a deist. What I kind of is my religious belief.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have a problem with Christianity.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, we're getting near the end of the broadcast. Rob Sullivan, any specific movie scenes that you want to talk about? I want to make sure that if you came prepared to talk about, I want to make sure you get your chances.
Oh no, I think we covered a lot tonight. I mean, like I said, the two books get into a whole wide variety of movies, whether it be Star Wars, Back to the Future, The Exorcist. I get into a lot of the spaghetti Western movies, the Harry Potter films. I'm trying to, some of the works of David Lynch. These are covered extensively, much more in the book. When I'm doing these shows, I'm of course limited because of time. But if you really want to go into the deep dark secrets, by all means, check out the 2 books. I'm writing the 3rd one right now, and I get into much more detail in the books about this movie Symbolism. And by all means, check them out. If you're interested in Freemasonry, check out my first book, The Royal Arch of Enoch. And if you're into some Gothic fiction, check out A Pact with the Devil.
You mentioned spaghetti westerns, and just a movie just scene came right to my mind. That was, I think it was High Plains Drifter, where the evil people were terrorizing this little town up in the mountains, and this girl, she's reading the Bible, and she says, she's reading the part where it says, and he rode in on a black horse, and then out of the mountains comes Clint Eastwood riding on his horse right past her, right when she's saying, are you familiar with that scene?
Not off the top of my head. The movies I talk about are the Sergio Leone ones. And he was a Roman Catholic, and those movies are very Christian in nature. Those things have a lot to do with good versus evil, God versus the devil, especially Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. That's really his religious masterpiece. And I get into that in cinema symbolism too. So if you're interested in that, by all means, take a look at it or read the book.
Well, when you were studying different religions, did they all seem the same to you?
Oh, no, different religions have different tenets. The one thing that really interested me about, the Abrahamic faiths is each one seems to have its own mystery school involved with it. Certainly in Hebrew, in Judaism, you have Kabbalah. In Islam, you have Sufism. And then in Christianity, you have astrology and astrotheology and a whole comparative religion with the sun and the stars. In Christianity, that's really a source of fascination with me. And this is something I talk about in depth in the Royal Arch of Enoch, because a lot of these elements turn up in the Masonic rituals, are trying to convey this sort of esoteric themes going on in these religions. And this is something, if you're interested in that, by all means, check out the Royal Arch of Enoch book. That's something that really fascinates me.
Yeah, just another movie just came to my mind, Rob, in the movie Tombstone. At the very beginning, when they shoot it out, they're shooting everybody at this wedding, and then it pans back, and Johnny Ringo, Curly Bill, was it Curly Bill? No, it wasn't Curly Bill Brosey. Well, maybe what? Yeah, it was Curly Bill Brosey. He says, "What was that? What was that crazy Mexican talking about? A white horse will come after us." And he said, he was quoting Revelations. And and then it fins off to Wyatt Earp getting off on his horse getting out. So a lot of symbology. I think Johnny Ringo was quoting the same verse that was in High Plains Drifter.
Very possible. Yeah, I mean, you'll find biblical imagery all over the place in film. No doubt about it.
Okay, well, Rob Sullivan, we got near the end of the broadcast again. How can people get these books?
Yeah, like I said, it's Royal Arch of Enoch, Cinema Symbolism 2, and A Pact with the Devil. They are available on all the major online retailers in print form and ebook form. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million. If you want to, you can go to my website. It's very easy to navigate. There are links there to buy the books. My website is my name. My name is Robert W. Sullivan IV. So my website is robertwsullivaniv.com, robertwsullivaniv.com. Again, links to buy the books. Information about me, information about upcoming shows I'm going to be on. This show was posted there. And of course, I'll spread the YouTube video around. And I would also like to thank you very much for having me on Edge AM. I really appreciate it. I thought it was a tremendous show. And maybe sometime in the near future, I could come back for a part 2. I absolutely loved it. So thank you very much for having me on.
Okay. All right. I appreciate you too as well, Robert Sullivan. We'll have you back on, and stay safe over there in Baltimore, Maryland.
Well, thank you very much, and have a good evening.
You too. Bye-bye.